Hey, everybody. So good to be here. I dressed up for the event. I told Henry when I did walk on the streets of New York, I gave up everything, but I got to dress the same. There's no difference. Henry, thank you for that really kind introduction. Henry's one of those people that you have to admire, and he inspires me, inspires so many of us. What you may not know is he's been the CEO of his company for 42 years. 42 years. That's the one thing I'm not going to imitate of you, because I think I'd be 107 if I retire then. So I do want to thank everybody for coming out this evening. I know everybody's got a lot to do, and it's so great for everybody to be here, to be so generous, and I really appreciate that. I know everyone at SEO appreciates that. I also want to congratulate Vicki and Thurman as well. Yeah. I have some deja vu with Thurman because I was recognized at the Brennan Center for Justice as one of their award winners, and I was recognized with Reverend Barber. I don't know if any of you know Reverend Barber, but he is one of the most dynamic speakers ever. And I followed him, and now I get to follow you, which is so unfair, so unfair. Of course, I want to thank my colleagues at PayPal for being here as well. Thank you. And all of the leadership at SEO. You know, and Henry asked me to be here. You really can't say no to that when Henry asked you that. But then I did all of my research because I really feel like if you're going to be up on stage, the values that I have and the values of PayPal with the organization that we're being recognized need to match up. And they so do. So Adam, Rachel, thank you. William, thank you so much for honoring all of us and having this event and for everything you do. And for all the scholars and kids, I'm going to give you something. You don't even have to write it down because you'll remember it. I'm going to give you my email right now, okay? Because I do want you to apply at PayPal. I know, Louise, I shouldn't do this, but I don't really care, and you'll see. So it's dan@paypal.com, okay? So there it is. So remember that. And I'm serious about it, too. I'm serious about it because you inspire me. I just want to say a quick couple of words because we live in a difficult time right now in our country. There's no question you can't get away from the cultural wars that are going on around us. This past week was a hard week, but there have been a lot of hard weeks where we've been all kind of thinking about what's happening with our country, what's going on around the world. And one of my favorite quotes about democracy is that democracy needs to be more than two wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for dinner. Okay, think about that. Think about that. Okay, so what that really says to me is that, democracy isn't rule of the mob, right? Democracy isn't two against one. Democracy is all about rising above your own self-interest, to vote for the greater good, to vote for something bigger than maybe what your own needs are. But that's really, really difficult to do. It's hard to move up Maslow's need hierarchy when so much of our country is hurting, where two-thirds of our country, at the end of every month, struggle to make ends meet. The statistics are that over 50% of all American families have less than $400 of savings. Less than 400. That's basically nothing. They're one incident away from a downward spiral. Their car needs to be repaired. They have a medical emergency, their rent goes up, and then they immediately go into a downward spiral. And there's another quote that is very true in financial services, and that quote is, "It's expensive to be poor." Because the things that so many people take for granted, like cashing a check or sending money to somebody you love, getting credit, paying a bill, for those who are underserved, and that's 70 million people in our country, and about 1.7 billion people around the world, those things are incredibly time-consuming for them. They stand in line just to cash a check. They stand in line again for another 30, 45 minutes to pay a bill. And it costs them a tremendous amount just to change from one currency to another currency. On average, over $142 billion are spent every year by those who are underserved in unnecessary fees and interest. $142 billion. I mean, imagine, we just raised probably a little over $1.5 million or so, about that here, but every year, $142 billion. That's 10% of the disposable income of those who are underserved. It's the same amount that they spend on food. So I think that's absolutely ridiculous. With technology, we ought to be able to do those basic transactions at 80% less cost than what typically happens today. And my view of this is that managing and moving money should be a right for every citizen in our country and not a privilege for the affluent. And we need to stand up for that, and we need to make sure that happens. Because democratizing financial services, and so many of us in this room are about this, is something that matters not just to everybody, it matters to the very fabric of our country and our democracy. And I think as leaders, and we are all leaders in this room, as Henry said, and I say this all the time, I think that leaders and businesses have a moral obligation to take a stand and stand up for the values of their company. Stand up for their values. And those values are difficult to stand up for. Henry talked about when we pulled out of North Carolina because of HB 2, which was kind of known as the bathroom bill. That's sort of a red herring around it. It allowed for the potential discrimination against somebody for their sexual orientation or sexual identity. And there should be no room in our country for discrimination of any kind. Thank you. I said on TV, I said on radio that I didn't think our pulling out was a political issue. I don't think that discrimination is something that is a red issue or a blue issue. That value is a red, white, and blue issue. That's our American value. You should not be able to discriminate. Our country was founded on that kind of principles. And when it happened, unfortunately, I immediately got a couple of death threats. I was telling Henry that when we made the decision to pull out of InfoWars and Gab recently, more death threats came. And I made the mistake of telling my mom about these death threats. This is a thing I'm going to advise all of you who get death threats. Never tell your mother. She's like, oh, my. Would you do that again? And I was like, 100 times out of 100, because we have that obligation to stand up. So Henry talked about sharing our values, sharing the values of SEO, and I firmly believe that. We believe in democratizing financial access, and you believe in democratizing access to education. And I think both of those are crucial to the fabric of our country. And I am so proud to be a part of this, to see the students come on stage. It was inspiring for me. And I hope it inspires all of you as well to make a stand in some small way. I always say to my company, look, we can't solve all the problems of the world. It's impossible. But in the military, we have a saying that the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to take whatever small steps we each can take, and together that'll make a real difference. So thank you very much for this recognition. Have a good evening.